bracelet shows when you
Oh, I know.
So they first box, they send you like a mixture of different things you can try it on. So all day long I've been eating stuff I don't like. I don't like mustard flavored stuff. I'm not a big raisin person.
Okay, I'm ready when he is. That's a miracle.
For this meeting.
To get you through.
It's like chocolate. Tastes like a Slim Fast.
What?
It's like a Slim Fast.
I hope we're not on air.
It's fine. Hi.
I like your style, Steven.
Where am I?
Might try that.
I pull out the keyboard if I've got to type something
Great.
on, but
All right, we're going to call to order the City Council Oversight Committee meeting. Today is Thursday, April 14th, 2022. And the first item on our agenda is a presentation from Mark Nanny, the chairman of the Greenbelt Commission, regarding a recommendation from the Greenbelt Commission in regards to its purpose, vision, and proposals. So I
Well,
think we've
thank
got you teed up.
Yeah, I'm not the chairman. George Dotson is the
Right,
chairman.
yep.
I am the co-chair. Sometimes you see it as vice chair, but that sounds to me like something you wouldn't want to get caught sitting in. So I could co-chair.
Okay.
All right. So thank you all for taking time to have us here. The Greenbelt Commission has been around for several decades, and we meet monthly, and in addition to what we do on a regular monthly basis, we've also been talking about how can we improve Norman with green spaces, trails, and all of that. And due to a variety of things, which I'm going to kind of touch on in a few moments, we've been waylaid, COVID being one of them. But to tell you where we are now, why we're here talking to you, and where we want to go from this point forward.
Right.
So just to let you know, there are 9 of us, and we have one other member here with us, Marguerite Larson. And there are 9 of us, each one of us representing a ward or a member at large. So the purpose for us being here today is I want to explain to you why we want to clarify Article 21, which is the article that describes what the Greenbelt does and our purpose. And we have gone through the wording, and that document, Jane, I think, yeah, it's gone through legal. So, it's ready for the City Council approval. But we want to explain to you what we did and why we did it. And then I want to talk about what we want to do now that we are at this point and we get this wording put into place, and how we want to move Norman forward. So to do that, I'm going to talk about what is a greenbelt. Okay, you ask somebody what a greenbelt is, they have a lot of different ideas. I also want to give you a brief outline of the history and purpose of the Greenbelt Commission. We have been doing this for about 26 years, so it's a slow process. And then third, what do we need right now? Clarification of Article 21 and what we want to do to move forward. So what is a greenbelt? If you look at the greenbelt documents for the City of Norman, you'll see that there's 3 different types of entities, objects. And the first one are things like public parks, golf courses, and nature preserves. Things that are green spaces used for recreation by the public. The second thing is a system of trails, both on and off road. And that's what we're most noted for. And if you look at the Greenbelt documents online, you'll see there's a big, thick addendum that contains all these really fabulous maps. And these are suggested trails that were developed by a consulting firm. And then third, just any kind of large area of green space that enhances the overall nature of the city, but it's privately owned. So these are the three types of green spaces that the Greenbelt documents refer to. Now, the interesting thing about the trail system that was developed by the citizens of Norman and this consulting firm is that there's a series of trails across Norman. And it's really difficult to see here on the screen. They're kind of faded out, but you can see there's yellow and orange and blue and light blue and teal and all different kinds of trails on there. But they are designed and developed according to the various watersheds in Norman. So when they built this document back in 2011, the idea was to try and give each watershed its unique entity. It's rather than just a grid overlaid the city. And if you look at the at this document here that has all the maps in it, you will see there are each section in that book is related to each individual watershed. Here's kind of a better view of how the trails are, with red being high priority, yellow being intermediate, and blue being long-term priority. And then in here you see teal colored. Those are ones that could be developed by private development. And again, these are all recommended. The city council never codified these. They did accept the Greenbelt document, but all these maps they put as an addendum because members of the public were getting worried. They'd see a line there and they're like, wait a minute, I think that's going through my backyard. Okay, and these are really recommended trails that follow the watershed, the rivers, the creeks. So Greenbelt got its start back in '96 with the Norman 2020 Land Use and Transportation Plan. Goal 5 said they wanted to have a Greenbelt development for Norman. In October of '97, they formed the Citizens Greenbelt Steering Committee that produced a report on greenbelts and greenways for Norman. 3 years, about 2.5 years later, the City Council appointed a Greenbelt Commission, and in the next about 2 years, they came up with this document, Green Dreams, report and recommendations on forming a greenbelt system for the city of Norman. And then by 2009, Health Associates prepared the Greenway Master Plan, those maps that I just showed you. Okay. And in 2009, City Council accepted the 7 key guiding principles as basis for development of the future policy and regulations. Then in 2012, the city adopted the whole Greenways Master Plan. Like I said, the idea, but not the document with the maps. So what the Greenbelt's purpose was at this time was to go through and identify parcels of land and develop a policy that to determine Greenbelt suitability and look for partnerships and ways of implementing these trails, and also ways of securing funds, and to make recommendations to the City Council regarding these policies. So we are an advisory commission to the City Council and the mayor. Advocate for the Greenbelt system in the city's planning process, get public opinion as we go through this, and help develop policies regarding security and safety in the Greenbelt system. And how that's done is every month we meet, and developers are required to submit a Greenbelt enhancement statement that review and receive any kind of opportunities for incorporating this Greenbelt path in that design that they have. And I will say it is it's a nice process because we get to meet with the developers and talk with them, and we've had some developers very open-minded about coming to us and saying, hey, I know my design isn't the best. What could I do to maybe make this a little bit better? And so over the years I've been on the Greenbelt Commission, I've seen a shift from designs where how many houses can I get on this space to, hey, we know Norman likes this, we know the city council wants this, how can we make this better? And so it's fun to be able to say, we're giving this design, kudos because they've incorporated this, this, and this. So I feel like we've kind of shifted from this grouchy green to, a helpful commission. So we've been doing that, what I just explained, for quite some time, and we realize that we're never going to get anywhere close in the next several decades doing this process. We have to be more proactive in how we're going to develop any kind of trail system or anything. So we went back to that big big book of maps, and we realized that, it's like a plate full of spaghetti, all those trails, they're all over the place. And it's like, we need to have a priority. We need to be able to focus in and start really saying these are trails that will form the backbone of a trail system for Norman. So we went through 2 iterations. Our original iteration was along Little River, but we had a lot of public pushback on that, so we pulled that out and we put in this Tecumseh line. And this was approved by City Council in 2017. So this gives us a way to when there is any kind of road development or other sorts of construction activity or in the city, we can say, there is this trail system in place. Now, the idea here, like for example, you see these straight lines. The idea is we don't want a 10-mile long runway that's 5 feet wide. Instead, the idea here is that, are there ways we can work with developers or find ways that we can make this kind of go away from the road and come back to the road or whatever. But Tecumseh is the backbone. And the same thing for all the other straight lines you see on there. They're not just this giant miles long sidewalk. So once we got that in place, we felt pretty good. And we said, well, let's see what other states around us are doing. And so we dished out different states to everybody. We looked at Colorado, Nebraska, Arkansas, and we also looked at what we're doing here in Oklahoma as to, they've got some really great trail systems. How did it start? Who owns those trails? How are they maintained? The long and short of it is Oklahoma is really unique in that land ownership laws really limit us in what we can do. Many times property, for example, along the river, the property line goes to the middle of the river, okay? So if you want to do any kind of development, say along the Canadian River, you have to essentially interact with every single property owner. And if one property owner says, no, I don't want to play, you've got a broken link there, okay? So things like that really just handcuffs or limits what we can do. And so we kind of, are scratching our heads. What should we do? In the meantime, a situation came up where our responsibilities and scopes were questioned, meaning that are we just to focus on this map, these trails, or is the Greenbelt something that's more dynamic and grows with Norman, recognizing that Norman is going to be continually changing and that book of maps, even this priority trails, 10 years from now may not be the most optimal design. Are we married to this and that's what we're guiding toward, or can we adapt as Norman grows? We all felt that as we looked at the Greenbelt documents and as we had been operating all these years, really it was about growing with Norman. And being mindful of Norman's growth. So that is why we went back to Article 21. Article 21, by the way, doesn't really say one way or the other. It's kind of vague. It's rather ambiguous. And we spent a lot of time going around, what does this mean? Does it mean we're doing it this way or we're doing it that way? How should it be? So George and I and I can't remember who else. Another Greenbelt commissioner who's not with us. Samantha, and this was in March of 2020. I remember meeting in the public library, and it was right at before COVID. But we went through and we tweaked, or we went through line by line, and we're like, okay, let's make each one of these statements a little bit more clear and specific, that we are not just married to this static document, but rather we are dynamic and growing with the intent of the Greenbelt. So that's if you look at Article 21, I think you all should have received that. I'm not going to go through the wording because it's kind of tedious, but it's just, you'll see there's no major changes. We're not changing our responsibilities. We just want to make it clear that we're not stuck in a very static system. So, so our goals for clarifying it, make more definitive wording about our responsibilities and defining exactly what constraints we had, if any, imposed by the master plan. Determine what new responsibilities we should assume in its role advising City Council and the Mayor. For example, expanding our responsibility to make Norman a greener city rather than just a system of trails that are defined by lines on a map. And allow the Greenbelt Commission to address items consistently appearing in public surveys regarding what folks want in Norman. Connectivity of neighborhoods and points of interest, public green spaces, nature trails, all these sorts of things that aren't explained specifically like that in the original document because no one was using those words back then when that document was created. So where do we want to go? Once the City Council gives us the approval of the wording in Article 21, we have two immediate term approaches and then a longer term ideas. I'm not going to go through the longer term ideas. I did include the slides just so you know that we've been thinking about them at a level of detail that's more than just, we have to integrate with the City of Norman departments, but we've actually gone down a couple more levels in thinking. So you can take a look at that and be happy to answer any questions. But for the immediate term, we really think the key to building a Greenbelt system or continuing building this Greenbelt system in Norman is going to have to encourage green development with developers. And our idea is that we want to work with developers, get developers together, find out what would entice them or what would motivate them to put in green development into their designs. And so we'll encourage, reward them for integrating and implementing green design. And a lot of these ideas we worked up with Richard McGowan back a couple of years ago, actually about 2020. And and so some of these ideas, not that these are exactly what we think need to happen, but these are some ideas that we feel are, it could work. Like, if you have, if you do green design, you get a green application sheet and you get to move to the head of the line and minimize time spent dealing with things. So allowing an R1G zoning to allow green residential development, smaller lots in lieu of greenways, cluster design. Kind of make it less complicated than a PUD, okay? So these are all things that are just some ideas we have. But our thought is we would like to get initially with some progressive developers in the City of Norman, like Richard, talk to them, develop some rough ideas, expand out to more of the development community, and create this dialogue between the city of Norman and the development community as to what would work so that these kind of green spaces, these kind of trails could be developed on their properties, and they could and also have connectivity among their developments and these sorts of things. Also work work with promoting the Greenbelt system and the growth and development in Norman. And this actually has been going on pretty well. This slide is a few years old, but the idea that we will have connectivity of the neighborhoods, we will avoid dead-end streets, even if it means we need to have just a pedestrian sidewalk, bicycle path between these dead ends so people can walk or bicycle through the neighborhoods. And some other ideas: fast track building sidewalks and trails that connect new and existing developments, as well as integrating kind of multimodal green corridors, connecting areas with apartments to points of interest. And this slide sort of got out of place here, but just for example, playing around on the map, one idea we talked about is down here on Imhoff, the Hitachi plant's right over here, we have all these apartment complexes. And if you look at Classen, there's not a lot of good sidewalks, there's not a lot of good ways for people to walk or bicycle. So, is there a way we could kind of make this kind of a green, multimodal pathway for bicycles, walkers, that sort of thing? So, that's just kind of doodling around on the back of an envelope kind of an idea, but it shows sort of some of the ideas we have for urban green space systems. So with that, I'm going to stop there and take questions and go from there.
Okay. Thank you
You're welcome.
so much for such an excellent and detailed presentation. And I just want to express my appreciation to you and to the rest of the Greenbelt Commissioners, because I think what we've seen demonstrated yet again today is the value of our residents being willing to step up and volunteer and lend their expertise to things that we all care about, and to take it to a deeper level than we might be allowed to do otherwise. So I appreciate your intentionality with your presentation today and all the work that you've done. And I think the pandemic, certainly, this is another example of the pandemic slowing us down on something that had gained some momentum, I think, in 2020. So I'm really glad that we could revisit this today. And before I open it up to council comments, I would like to remind everybody, which I should have done at the top of the meeting, that we really do have a very robust agenda today. And because the Planning Commission meets right after us, we have to stop at 6. So we're going to try to move along and, see where we can take this and then move on to the next thing. But thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
putting the time and effort into your presentation today. We really appreciate it. Any comments or?
I think,
Go ahead.
just want to echo what Councilmember Hall said about the, all of the work, tireless work I know that has gone into
It's fun.
reworking, all of Title 21 and kind of the trail system, and thinking about the greater vision for green belts in Norman and making Norman a greener city. I think that we all can really get on board with what that vision is looking forward. I guess my question really is for staff, is probably with our legal department, in the changes that are happening here. What is being asked of us moving forward? Like, will something come forward to us to update the ordinance language? Just clarification on the process moving forward. I think we're all on board with kind of implementing this, but what is the pathway?
Well, we'd have to review the changes and then bring that in ordinance form to council if you all want to look at that.
Okay, so what we see here is just kind of a draft form.
Yeah, and I think it's been a couple of years since anybody in our office looked at it. So
Okay.
we'll look at that.
Yeah, I know your office did, as I understand, looked at it and got it back to us, so, yeah. So it's been through your office once.
It's just been pre-COVID, I think, so.
Right, okay.
Kind of early COVID,
Right, we'll look at it.
or mid, I don't know.
Do you have any? Councilmember Holman?
Yeah. Were you finished?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to do this, given how, 2011 is a long time ago, 1996 is a long time ago, and things do change. Population grows, development patterns can change from how we thought they might be years ago. And so I think it's good to have some flexibility to adapt with a changing city like this. And I would mention too, the map you just had up, we do have a Constitution project and a Classen project.
Yes,
that are-
yeah.
I'm very excited to get those done and get some more connectivity going. And then the southeast part, that Destin's Landing developments, that there are some issues with that development that I had when it came before me, but it does present an opportunity to work with the developers of that and include these types of things in it, from day one. And then, as we're all familiar with the, turnpike issue, and
Yes.
Yeah.
how drawing lines on a map can really
Yeah.
mean
yeah.
a lot to some people, even if it's just to, so what we did was, decided we'll use the existing streets and use those as a baseline. What's kind of what I wish some other entities would do too, is say, hey, maybe consider some other things instead of just putting this line through your property.
Yes.
But the
Yeah.
fact that we were able to hear that feedback and adapt our plan to reflect that feedback and say, hey, we're not going to be ever trying to take your property from you to do this. This is all about just the natural development of things, and if there's funding available and we might make you an offer at some point, and if you reject it, we're not going to try to force you. So
Well, I remember the first map we presented. We had people come up who were very much. They said, "We love this, except we don't like the Little River part." And they were just. That's what really stoked a lot of energy.
it made the most sense, in my opinion, to follow
But
the path of the tributaries, and for the nature's sake and all that stuff. But being able to adapt our plan to reflect that, I think,
absolutely.
is a big deal. And like you said, being able to use these lines as not straight lines, but as just a base to, go from there. And so, yeah, I definitely support trying to allow the commission to be more adaptable to our changing landscape, and especially since our plans are getting a little old in the.
Councilmember Studley?
I was just going to also comment on the one that you had up with Imhoff. It was funny that you had that up because I was literally talking to Mr. Pyle before this meeting about a little area of land that's in there that will connect the Oak Creek or Oakhurst and Wood Creek addition. So I live in Wood Creek, so I love that
Okay.
idea to
Yeah,
have.
Yeah.
I'm Ward 1.
Yeah.
Oh, I am too.
Yes, I am aware. So thank you. So I love this, and the idea of what you're talking about, that this shouldn't be a static document. We're a living, breathing city that's constantly growing and changing, and the document needs to reflect so as well. So thank you for your hard work, and I appreciate it.
Well, it's the whole commission. Really, it is. It is. We work together as a team.
Councilmember Schuler?
Yeah, just right before Councilmember Holman was bringing up the conversation about the turnpike, and I think that I hope, and this is really just a comment about the continued work that the Greenbelt Commission will do, is that I hope that you'll stay on top of what is happening with
Trying to.
we are as well.
Yeah.
But how that will change what even this map might look like with, a turnpike running right through it. And I hope that you will advocate for,
Definitely. Yeah.
whatever is going to be best for our residents, for green space and trail systems, and whatever happens with that whole
No,
process.
we are. In
Because
fact, George asked me that question. He says, should we change, how should we approach the meeting? I said, well, George, it's so way up there in the air. Let's just go forward with what we have.
And I Ward 5, so it does.
Yeah.
speak to me.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just hope that you'll be a part of those conversations as you
We
are
would
advisory to
be-
council. Like, it's
love
gonna be
to.
so important for
Yeah.
us to hear your voices on that issue.
And with that, please reach out to us. We try and stay on top of things, but
Yeah.
reach out to us. Everyone, I guarantee you, everyone on the Greenbelt Commission, they're passionate about what they do. And, many of them would love to be more involved in these kind of things. So we're a resource waiting for you to use our help.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Councilmember Holman?
Yeah, we've, even just since this map's been adopted, we've had some new plans. We've got the Norman and Moore I-35 corridor plan, which includes a bridge over Franklin and
Yeah,
I-35.
yeah.
It wasn't anticipated to be
No,
there before.
No, you're right.
I don't know if Moore has a Greenbelt Commission or not.
No, not to my knowledge.
Or anything.
Not to my knowledge.
Like that, but it'd be nice to be able to work with them on their
That would,
connecting our
yes.
system to theirs in a way too. What opportunities there might be with whatever organization they have. I know they've been building some trails and more along their streets, the legacy trail type stuff. So, and they've done some greenbelt stuff as well along some of the streams. So, I don't know if there might be an opportunity for our
How
committee
would
to.
we, how would we initiate that? I
Well-
mean, who would be the person to reach out and?
I don't know who specifically at their city hall. I'm friends with a council member, Adam Webb, there, and he's a big proponent of trails and legacy trail type sidewalks and greenway stuff. But I don't know if they have a city staff person, or I would assume somewhere in the planning department maybe, but I guess I don't know if they have a citizen group or committee though of some kind. Might be something to look into though.
Okay.
See where we might be able to connect with them.
Yeah, well, we've even, when we've looked at some things over in this way and, or it was maybe here, I can't remember, but, as we looked into more, we could clearly see where there were opportunities for continuing our trail system through their neighborhoods and things, all the way up to their downtown area. I guess that's what you would, kind of where the
Yeah.
big movie theater is.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, that would be really nice.
Yeah, that would be nice if you could make that connection and see what kind of
Absolutely.
collaboration. So, just final comments before we move on. I think, one of the things that I've discovered as we've had to pause on so many things is that it actually has possibly been a blessing in disguise because so many things have changed since 2017. And I really appreciated your comments about having, being able to adapt and adjust. And I think all we've seen since 2017 is not only a deepening and a continuing interest on the part of our residents for this type of, having these kind of amenities, but also just growing our multimodal transportation system. And we're seeing it in the kind of funding that we're awarded too for the streets that we're building, and that the federal funding available is definitely rewarding a multimodal consideration, and definitely looking at how we can be a more pedestrian-friendly kind of town. And I know you've already had successful interactions with developers, and I think that's, a wonderful way to continue to collaborate and to, do that in a place that you can have these kind of discussions and they see the value of it as well. So as far as directions, so we just need to send this back to you to review. And the other thing I was going to say, this is really timely that we put it on the agenda because we have been undergoing several years' worth of reviewing our board and commissions, and that's going to be up for an agenda item, I believe, in the next month or two. And there has been some discussion about the Greenbelt Commission and its role. And I think you've certainly demonstrated today that you have accomplished a lot and continue to have the energy and the inspiration to want to keep working on
Definitely.
making Norman a greener place. So I think the value of your commission is really, really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So would we come back here, Catherine, or?
Yeah, that's fine, or we could,
Okay.
come to council, study session or conference.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll,
It could just be rolled into that whole rewrite of chapter 4 that we're already doing.
okay. Okay. All right. Do you have what you need?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate
and
your time today.
I want to thank all the members of the Greenbelt Commission. 'cause we
Thank
work
you all,
together.
and thanks for taking the time to
Thank
come
you.
today. Okay. All right, moving along. Agenda item number 2 is discussion regarding the rezoning policies, procedures, and processes. Who would like to start?
So, hi, I'm Beth Muckle of the City Attorney's Office, and whereas Mr. Nanny's presentation was here, I'm hoping, a little matter of housekeeping. I printed way too much and I feel super bad about it now.
Oh, knowledge is power.
This is an extremely quick example of what we're here to talk about, which is just a development postponement kind of policy of sorts. What's happened is over the years, our development policies have really had a lot of administrative leeway in deciding the pace at which they take their applications. And because of the way our code is set up, and I think I've said this before, we like to give our citizens a lot of notice. We go above and beyond what the state requires. And so we give that notice pretty early in the process. When pre-development is involved, it goes out in that letter. It goes out that early. So what can happen is after that initial notice, if someone doesn't follow the application and attend every meeting, they might not be aware of how that application is actually proceeding through the channels because additional letters don't go out. And so recently we have seen an increase in applications seeking postponement on the ultimate vote by council on that application, which of course, even in our normal cycle happens months after that initial letter is sent already. So already we've had our citizens watching for a while. So when there's multiple postponements, even though we're following the rules, even though we're doing it right and we're saying the dates and people have adequate notice, it can become burdensome and pretty hard for a citizen to follow. So what's been talked about for your consideration is whether or not we institute a more formal policy regarding postponements. And this is just a place to start, what I've given you. This is, and I'm sorry, before I printed, I forgot to put at the top, this is our zoning ordinance. It's section 442.1 entitled amendments, and that's of course amendments to our zoning ordinance, which, rezonings and PUDs such as that are coming under. And this is just the section regarding passage by city council, and says very simply, they get to ask for one postponement to a date certain as a matter of right, and after that, they have no reason to expect that they're going to get another one unless city council deems that it's the right thing to do and takes the vote on that. We try to make it clear the protest threshold of 3/4 wouldn't apply in a situation of this. Keep it as simple as possible. And that's just a very, very simple version of what it would look like. Of course, this has really only been talked about in the context of a city council vote, but before then, some of them are starting with pre-development. Now, it's not very common for people to postpone or reschedule pre-development, but when they do that, they have to resend those letters, and that costs money, so that doesn't happen as often. But it could be that we need to consider the fact that they are having a public hearing at Planning Commission too. Sometimes there are postponements at that stage, and there's no way of knowing whether or not setting a policy for city council might encourage more at that stage or not. So we wanted to throw that out there as an additional point of discussion for you to consider. But right now, this is just the language relating to city council consideration.
Okay.
Did you have anything to add, Jane?
No, it's just that one about the.
So A, B, and C, is that just currently what we have in place, or,
Yes,
okay,
that's exactly how it reads now. D would be added.
okay, so we're just proposing adding D.
Yes.
All right, okay, that helps me.
And subpart B references when, you have protests exceeding 50%, you need
Right.
a majority vote. And just in looking at that really quickly, we anticipated that might cause some confusion. Do you need a majority vote for the postponement? So we wrote in language to make it clear that that wouldn't necessarily apply. Again, this is just a suggestive draft. Oh, sorry, supermajority.
Okay, okay, Councilmember Studley.
So just to understand, this is for those cases that have recently come before us where the applicant has postponed numerous times when we think we're about to vote on something, the applicant postpones. So you're saying that this is now, if that happens, they get one postponement, but if they want to postpone again, then it has to come before council for us to approve the postponement. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, actually, the way we've handled it in the past is that postponements have been voted upon. And they've been typically allowed because they've been asked for. So I'm going to clarify that a little bit more on whether or not a vote is taken.
Yeah, usually we do vote on that.
That's what I was gonna say. I thought we had
But what we
been.
tell council is, our approach has always been to allow the applicant to control the course of their application. And so council feels like they have to postpone it. It's usually not an issue because they're not usually asking for a postponement more than once. And sometimes it's because they're working with the neighborhood. But in cases where they might ask for repeated postponements, it's really a disservice to the neighborhood.
Correct.
And this would make it clear from the outset that you're not necessarily guaranteed anything beyond the one postponement. We could postpone once by right. We understand things come up, maybe, someone gets sick out of town, whatever. But after that, it's gonna be council's vote and it's no longer should be assumed it's a given.
So the only difference is before, if the applicant had asked for the postponement, well, I mean, I guess I'm confused with how is this different than what we're doing now?
This is
It's just clarifying.
It's codifying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving us a policy so that if someone comes forward with a third request to postpone, you all don't feel like you have to postpone it because we've
Okay.
always let them control their application.
Okay, so this just, and it also puts a little bit of protection for the city as well by
Right.
saying, this is our policy, adhere to our policy. Fair enough, thank you.
And as written, it does say that it needs to be to a date certain, and that's straight Robert's rules, but also it doesn't say what date. So there are still matters to be discussed and voted upon in the context of that one as of right postponement by council.
Okay.
Councilmember Holman.
Yes, that's how I understand it too, is that it's just been customary in the past that council's always just granted a postponement if the applicant asked for it. It's their project. They might be trying to work with neighbors they might be trying to make changes that we asked them to make, stuff like that. But it has never been in writing that that's what we have to do or should do. And then there's been confusion, about should we grant this? They think we should, council may disagree. And then the public not having any kind of idea about what the process is or how many times they might have to come back. So this way this is the first time they could expect to get a postponement, but the council would still have to actually take a physical vote on it,
Yes.
like we already do.
And to weigh in on that date certain. They
Right.
could ask for a month. And the way this is written, that wouldn't guarantee them a month if council felt 2 weeks was more appropriate,
Okay, if we say that they can expect to have one, but it does still have to, the council does still have to vote, what if a council decides no? Can they say, well, in your thing, it says that you would give us one?
Right.
What if that council just doesn't feel like it in the future, whenever?
Well, so in general, as legal counsel to the city council, we would advise you to follow our ordinances. So we wanted to say what we wanted, what we want. So
Okay.
if we need to massage that, we
Well,
can definitely
just-
look into that more.
I guess as long as the council members knew and understood, that, this is what, the developer has a right to this.
Yes, our ordinance would entitle them to the postponement, but just one, and it has to be to a date certain. And of course, your voting discretion would go to what that date is.
Okay, well, I think it tackles what we been trying to address the past few months.
So, does anybody else have any other comments? Okay. This actually, we've experienced this just in the recent past, and I think Councilmember Holman and I have also been challenged in other situations, going back a few years. So this was something that I think there was consensus, not only with several council members, but also with our legal staff, that yes, this is probably something that we should codify because it's just been accepted as a courtesy. And so I think what we've encountered is the whole notion of the applicant controls their application, which I think, yes, that certainly is something that we want to be sure that the applicant can move along the process. But I think what we've discovered in the meantime, because I kind of want to back up a little bit, because I think this is where we end up, and it's about where we start. And there are things that I think are just procedure things, and I think there's things that are policy things that we may also want to consider. So I purposely made sure we had our agenda item broad enough to also consider just the process and how we go through it, because it's weighted right now on the applicant, and yes, it's upon them to follow the process and everything that they need to do to bring an application before council. And the reason that is because they can't currently do what they would like to do without going through the process of they're not coming to council to get approval of something that's already allowed under our land use plan or our zoning ordinance. So what has become apparent is this postponement in particular is, we didn't have a way to say, yes, we understand things come up. But before we get there, I want to make sure that we're discussing how we can assist the application process and the applicant to have a fully developed project to bring to council, because then there would be hardly any reason that they would have to have a postponement. So if we back up to pre-development, I've said this multiple times publicly, I think when neighborhood, in regard to the other A, B, and C of when a neighborhood protest is robust or there is interest in the project. Sometimes there's interest in the project because they just want to get questions answered. But I think we know now that we know pretty early in the process, because we do have a pre-development process, which is great, when there's going to be considerable interest from the neighborhood, for whatever reason. And, the more that we can take the time up front to mediate and work with neighborhoods or other types of communities. It may not be a neighborhood, it might be business owners, it might be, lots of different cohort groups that get involved in a project. I just feel really strongly that we need to take a look at that too, and that may not be a council thing, it may be a department thing. And so I just want to get that on the record as well, that when there is considerable interest with the neighborhood, that we spend more time up front, and that the applicant understands that that may be another step to allow more time, because they've got 30 minutes, that's it. Most of the time, that's more than adequate time to work through a project, but I would say in 5% of the time, it needs much more time than that. So there's that point. The next piece is, at that point, as you mentioned, the applicant can postpone for some reason or another. That would be allowed, but then they have to start over again, right? I mean, if they decide to postpone the pre-development meeting because they're not ready, does that ever happen?
It's not common, there have been some accidentally missed or something like that, pre-development meetings, that can happen. But in those cases, they do need to renotice and resend those letters, because that's the very beginning of the process.
Yeah.
And so those costs are on them. So generally we find it doesn't happen quite as much.
Yeah. So, so that part right there, they are driving the date and when the clock starts ticking, basically, at the pre-development level.
Right, on their schedule.
Yeah. So what I would like to see pursued, either parallel with this or along with this, is what kind of procedure can we put in place so that when there is interest and there is conflict that clearly is not going to be resolved in 30 minutes, that we have a way to invest the time there instead of just kicking the can down the road until it becomes a much more confrontational situation in front of the city council. Because I think I can think of so many examples in the last few years that if we had just been able to invest more time up front with the applicant understanding the value of that for the end goal, that would really help along the way. And then the second part is at the planning level. I want to also sort of have some clarification about when can the Planning Commission, when they don't see a fully developed project, in their opinion, can they postpone? I mean, I think they can. Can they postpone to get further information or to allow the applicant to come back and answer questions that they're not able of, they don't have the ability to answer, right? What is the actual authority of the Planning Commission? Because here's, again, just examples of what's happened in the recent past. They will ask, I mean, I have so much respect for the Planning Commission and they ask really good questions, but a lot of times they'll ask a question, it's not answered, and then it's like, oh, well, you better be ready to answer that when you come before City Council. And I think they should have the authority or the ability to fully review that project before they make a recommendation, even if it means postponing it for a month. And I think if we can, have a more clear understanding with the applicant of what is expected at each step of the way and what the Planning Commission, what they can and can't do. Because the other thing that happens is they approve a project, and then when we see it, it can be substantially changed. So how does that approval, how is that even relevant to the council when we don't even realize, unless you're just paying attention because it's in your ward, that there's been substantial changes made, enough that it's not even the project that they originally voted on. So I think that's an issue also. What was the other one? So when it hits the council level too, if there's no other way to have what I would say, a finished project ready for review by the council, do we have the ability to say, this is not ready? And can we kick it back? This has come up before and it's been unclear. Can we kick it back to the Planning Commission? Or can we postpone and say, you haven't been able to address all of these concerns? So it's either reject or approve, but is there another step that gives them another opportunity? But the entire point of this is, whatever we can do to provide clarity so that the applicant understands that by the time they come to City Council, it should be ready to go and not use council time to postpone and, keep coming back with other recommendations and stuff. So that's just something that I've been obviously very outspoken about. And the other thing that has really been a loss, in my opinion, is that we do not have a transcript anymore of the Planning Commission. And so if we're supposed to take the recommendation of the Planning Commission, but we have no context for how they arrived at that, and if we have questions about the project, we really don't have a way to get that information before us. So those are just my thoughts. Councilmember Schuler.
Just to kind of tack on to that with some of the frustration that we've had with some projects that have come forward in recent months is not specifically around the clarification around what has changed between Planning Commission and Council. And it's very difficult for us to look back through project, I guess, minutes and attachments and things to see like what has substantially changed or what is minutely changed. And not having that transcript has been difficult for us to kind of, unless you're sitting in the meeting or you have time to go back and watch the meeting. And I think that, Councilmember Hall really laid out some of the, I think, challenges that we're having when it comes to council in the times when there is a large, robust interest from, like she said, many interested groups, neighborhood, businesses, and it really is on the council member whose ward it's in to really be the one to kind of drive those conversations and kind of be up to speed. But then we're also hampered by Open Meetings Act and being able to really fully help our fellow council members get up to speed as well, in case we're going to be in violation of, Open Meetings Act. So I think what we're trying to do is make sure that Planning Commission has enough information, that our residents have enough information, and then ultimately we have enough information to make sound decisions on land use and zoning changes when an applicant is coming forward. And I mean, I've seen too now that we're having some projects especially, and this is not to say this is like a majority of projects. It's a handful of them. And I think we can identify which ones they are pretty quickly in that pre-development stage, based on the number of people that show up, the questions that are asked in that 30 minutes. Is there enough time? Is there not enough time? How quickly people start to put in protest letters, and before Planning Commission, or if you have a pre-development meeting and then it starts over right away, because I have a project that had never even got any further than a pre-development meeting and is now starting over the process again. And I already know that there's going to be a large interest in that project. And on the heels of all of this, it'd be really great to have a pathway that's understandable for all members.
Did you have a comment? No.
So,
Councilmember Holman?
Yeah, I agree with the comments made. I think having some clarity, I mean, we've heard, projects that use a unanimous planning commission vote to promote their project and why we should vote for it. But if the planning commission sends a unanimous no vote, it's like that doesn't matter. It has no weight. And they advise that we ignore it and just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. So I'd like to have some sort of clarity on what does it mean? What does the recommendation from the planning commission mean? What does it weight? Can it hold? Does it hold? Should it hold? Mm-hmm. And yeah, we were told in that one specific project that we couldn't really send it back to the planning commission, even though changes had been made, significant ones from what they had voted unanimously against. Maybe if it went back to them, they would have liked the changes and voted unanimously for it. I don't know. So we've seen that happen before.
Yeah.
So I think it would be helpful for us as a city. It's something people have talked about for years, that our council meetings compared to other cities can be more contentious. Mm-hmm. I argue that we have a more interested public than more in Oklahoma City and Edmond and other cities. We have neighborhoods that are more interested, or feel like maybe they just feel like this city hall is one where they're more welcome to give their voice, and in other cities they feel like they're not. Yeah. And so I don't know. But to be able to potentially flesh out a lot of these issues before they come to city council, where it's on TV, it's a big show, it's political, and emotions are going to run high, and it'd be nice to be able to get a lot more of that kind of taken care of before it comes to us, if at all possible. And I know some projects, there's a person that wants to do it's going to want to do it, and no matter what, they're going to plow ahead. But it seems like some could be, some of the stuff that we've seen at city council could be avoided potentially if there was the ability to address them in these other meetings.
And I think it's important for me to say that I mean, the last thing I want to do is create, additional pressure on our staff.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it harder on the applicant either, but I just feel like, I don't know, the more longer past of this, but just in my engagement, these things seem to be more litigious than they used to be. That may not be the reality, I don't know. But I just believe that it doesn't have to end up that way. And that I think just clarity, maybe some training for council, for the planning commissioners, on what their options are when they are clearly not satisfied with the project. But it's just like, well, we'll just let the city council figure it out. So I think it would be, worth trying to see if we can come up with a little bit more clarity on each step of the way. And I believe that it is a very small percentage of cases, so it's not going to change the routine much, but to give us an opportunity to be in a position of mediating upfront and really inviting the neighbors in to be part of the solution. And I think we would have more positive outcomes and better projects, frankly, when, there was a really authentic discussion between the applicant and whoever the interested party is to clearly not have worked through what the issues are. And then the other part that I wanted to add to all that is the other thing that has been an issue that probably also needs clarification, and I think this may come from a different place, but I know this is something that Councilmember Holman and I have continued to have frustration about, and that is, what is the process when a neighborhood feels so disenfranchised from being engaged in the process that they also hire an attorney to represent them? And we have, it's taken some discussion to arrive at what that protocol is, but I can think of several issues now, several applicants now, since I've been on council, that there has not been a positive outcome between the neighborhood. The pre-development process has failed, and the neighbors have felt compelled enough to, come up with a lot of resources to hire an attorney. And it's been really hard for that attorney to have the proper amount of time to represent their neighborhood. And, we've done different ways, and ultimately we've kind of found a fix for that particular application. But I think that's something else that either the council or, how the process works, we need to address that as well. Because I have come to the conclusion at this point that when we have different constituent groups in town that try to feed the narrative of how difficult it is to do business in Norman. And I think one of the most obvious things that we just don't even really think about is, why should applicants have to hire attorneys to come represent them for a zoning change?
Right.
That places another burden on the application process. So those are just my thoughts. I feel strongly about this, so I'm glad I've finally had an opportunity to lay it all out there and see if we can get some clarity here. Councilmember Schuler, or go ahead.
I was just gonna kind of, just for clarification of what you're saying, and I don't know if this is something that you guys can do, but I'm assuming what she's talking about is having, like, where the applicant's attorney can come up and talk to us pretty much unlimited time. They can do a presentation and do whatever, but then whenever you have the neighborhood there and their attorney, there isn't any time for them to speak, and that's not fair. So I don't know, is that something that can be changed in this?
That's only really come up with the recent time limitations on speakers.
It's
It used
the
to, it
chair.
was just unlimited
is
for
the-
everyone. So what we have done, I think, and it's at the discretion of the chair of the meeting, but what we have done is found out who they represent and then multiplied that number by 3, so they get 3 minutes for each of those. The applicant's always gotten as much time as they need to present their application because it is their application. They are the ones with an item on the agenda. And so we don't want to prejudice their ability to present all the information to council. And of course, a lot of that time is spent up there answering questions too.
Yeah,
Um,
which I don't want to hinder them either,
right,
but I
right. So
also
that's why
feel
they've
like
typically not been time limited.
if we're in a case like this, and I don't know if this is something that can only be decided by the chair or something that we can write into a policy or ordinance or whatever, but if we're saying that as an applicant, you get to speak unlimited because it's your application, but if there is more than certain percentage of neighborhood disagreement or whatever disagreement, that we would at least allow that same opportunity for the opposition to make their case to us. Because if they're allowed to come and present why we should do it, I feel like we should at least be able to hear the other side and not do this 3-minute per person that's coming. That's very limiting.
We can definitely look at that. My concern about picking applications that appear to be more controversial or have more interest in treating them differently is that sets them up for a pretty good argument that we have prejudice in
Okay.
some way. And so I want to make sure
Okay.
we don't do that.
Yeah.
But we can look at those type of things and see if there's any case law out there that would help guide those decisions, certainly.
Councilmember Holman?
Yeah, I think it's,
Oh, sorry.
oh, we're,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I let Brandy go, so sorry. Yeah, and I think through this process we're not trying to hinder the process
Right.
or I think as Ms. Walker put it, like prejudice against the applicant, or I think that we're trying to find a pathway forward so that our residents do feel like their voice
Right.
is being heard and that we get to hear information. I think, as a council, we want to make sure that we are hearing, kind of all sides of a project, of an issue before we're making a decision. And sometimes, with the way that things have gone, I personally haven't felt like, I personally felt like it's been very difficult to get all of the information to make a really sound decision for our community. And so I think that what we're trying to do is balance those two things. Like I understand, it's the applicant's application, they are bringing that forward, it's their project. But I think what's really important to always underscore here is that they have to come to council because they cannot do their project by right, based on our zoning ordinance and by our land use plan. And so there's some kind of variance, there's some kind of special use or change that they're asking from us. And there's a reason why we have our zoning ordinance and our land use plan in place. And those documents are basically a contract with our community on how we're going to proceed with development. And so I think that we owe it to our residents to have meaningful conversations and discussions about it, and that they are able to lodge support and or opposition to those things. And I think, I think it's going to be challenging. I don't know that we've got all of the right answers, but, and I'm also cognizant of, as soon as you codify something, then people figure out that process and will use that and manipulate it. And so I think right now the system is being manipulated by coming to council and then using it as political theater to, do what they want or strong arm or, push project forward or disenfranchise neighborhoods and things like that. And so I understand that we might just see something different if we codify this. And so, you're always trying to stay one step ahead of kind of what the next tactics are going to be. But I think we've got to do something to make the process more consistent.
Councilmember Holman?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I've made my thoughts about the time limits on speaking and the changes to the meetings known. I don't really support them because we didn't have this problem before.
Okay.
Now, there were times where some meetings could go longer, but I mean, I don't even know about that. It hasn't been proven to me yet that the changes that have been made to the meetings have resulted in shorter meetings. We saw that with the budget meeting last year, that it was 30 minutes shorter.
Yeah.
So people got to speak less, but it still didn't shorten the time. So in my previous experience on council, I mean, it wasn't extremely often, but when there was a project that was controversial, perhaps, yeah, the applicant had time. I've listened to a 2-hour presentation from Sean Rieger before, and then listened to 2 hours of public comment about it right? So 4 hours on one item. And I know that's not pleasant for a lot of people, and that's not something we want to do all the time, but it was the most fair, in my opinion. And now we're in a situation where it's not fair, and we're running into problems where the public feels like, we hired an attorney, their attorney gets to speak forever, and the council he gets to respond to every question the council asks, and we're not getting that same access. And even if we didn't hire an attorney, we've only got 30 minutes to speak. So we all have to like cram our stuff in. So people are stumbling over themselves to try to get everything they got out in 3 minutes. I just don't know what the new chair's opinion is about that is going to be or is. But it's something I've been concerned about since we made the changes, and I've seen it kind of just create this. There's even like more animosity or like more tension because there's less time to speak, and it feels like it's weighted one way now when
Yeah.
it wasn't before, even though maybe sometimes it went a little bit longer.
Did you have
So
a
anyway.
comment?
Yes.
Okay.
So first, I blame myself for implying this was a simple subject. Suggest that we come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have some feedback now.
Okay.
On some of the simpler items, and I won't take long. I know we're time limited here, but such as pre-development. You know, we do actually have a really great process in place
Yeah.
where we get people involved from the
Yes.
beginning.
I love
And
that.
those meetings are always facilitated by planning staff, and they're
Yep.
opened up with the specific explanation of, you know, you're here to ask questions and you're here to exchange information. And, you know, honestly, maybe it just takes, you know, at the end of those meetings, saying it again to remind them that, hey, this is the starting point. We encourage you to please be in contact. We have the system in place, and we can definitely look in ways to beef that up. But it could be just like you said, Councilmember Schuler, a matter of communication and reminding them that the process is in place to get you in communication. Because to some extent, we can really only lead that horse to water. You're going to have some neighbors that are going to oppose no matter what, and you're going to have
Sure.
some applicants that, as Councilmember Holman said, are going to ask for what they want, no matter what. But yes, I think we have a good process, and we can look at developing that more.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of comments about things changing between Planning Commission and City Council. And of course, you know, staff is reviewing these items, and especially legal from the standpoint of making sure they complied with notice requirements. I mean, that's priority number one. So I want you to know that we are on that. Typically, the changes we see are a lessening in scope of their ask. So they're coming closer to what they already are. So we see that within the scope of the notice given. If they noticed for something larger or more intense, and they're since they started that process, they've decided based on comments to lessen that ask in response. So that's a good thing that we don't want to discourage. But I can see what you're saying about those changes. A lot of those are going to be happening on PUDs. Because those are the make from scratch items, right? And I did want to take an opportunity to point out, it's in our zoning ordinance, page 13, section 420. There are very specific instructions right now about what Planning Commission does and what
Okay.
City Council does. And it says Planning Commission can approve, recommend approval conditioned upon specified modifications. So that means they're approving, assuming that changes are going to happen between Planning Commission, you know, encouraging those changes. So that's actually a part of our process to push them in the direction they think it needs to go. And of course, the applicant has been in control of their application, so they hear that. They know there's now that official recommendation that if they're approved, it should be in this way. And they have the choice to make that, and if they don't, then of course, City Council, you know that. And then they can also recommend disapproval, of course. And to your point, Councilmember Holman, that's exactly what it is. You know, those recommendations are recommendations for your ears. And I'm definitely hearing the comments about the transcript. And so on those items and on matters of how much time to speak, we definitely need more time to reflect. But as far as PUDs and the city council, I thought you'd want to hear this. The city council may grant, deny, defer for requested changes or information, or return the application to the planning commission for further study. That language has been in our PUD ordinance for a long time now.
For PUDs.
And of course,
PUDs.
I will say that it's not something I'm trying to encourage because of course that is kind of going against the grain of the first subject we had, which is how to keep these projects from
Moving,
prolonging.
yes.
Yeah, how to keep them going.
Yeah.
But so we do have some mechanisms and starting points for the questions you've asked, but I do think that based on the breadth of what has been presented here, I'd recommend coming back here again.
And I do want to say, to come back full circle, I really appreciate, the addition here on the postponement issue. And I think, there's pretty clear support to move forward on that, I would say, right? Yeah. Yeah, okay. And I know that that's a lot thrown back at you, but it just seems like as long as we're going to discuss this, that we might as well toss all these other things out too, because again, I understand that, or I guess I should say that's what we need to understand is some of the things that maybe we can't do, but that the communication piece, maybe we can, focus there. And I really do want to see if there's a path that's equitable, I guess. I've sat through, again, this is the minority of projects. Most things really do move through in a timely manner, but we're on a very strict 30-minute limit. I understand the side of that's what everybody gets, but when that means if an applicant uses 15 minutes to describe their project and there's 15 minutes for questions and there's a room full of people and you don't get to all of that, then what happens? Because that's where the frustration starts. A lot of times nobody even shows up, but when there's enough interest in a project to not be able to have the proper amount of time to answer everybody's questions, and I know you can't do it the night of because they're so tightly scheduled, but through the pandemic, we have used like a Wednesday and a Thursday night when we needed to, when there were so many projects or we were backed up. And I don't know, I just like to see what our options are. Councilmember Schuler.
I just lost it.
Oh,
It was, about the transcripts and changes to council. So, as Ms. Mucklow was reading our language there about, that we're encouraging, changes to be made between planning commission and coming to council, I think, and this may be happening, and I don't, but maybe in kind of a more like bulleted fashion, like it might be helpful if, because I know staff is aware of what is changing. So maybe if that can be a little bit more clear in the staff report, like that might alleviate some of like our misunderstanding of like what has changed and trying to go through documents and look at, especially for PUDs, like, oh, I've seen this one from planning commission, I see this new one that's been attached to like our document or our agenda, and sometimes it's like, what has changed between the two? And so trying to go through the pages, so just for some clarification.
And that actually
Is that,
reminds me.
is that happening already?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify, and you know this, but so many times those changes come in the day of your meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if there is something, at
It
planning
is-
commission, when they say, we'd really like to see you do this, and the applicant says, happy to do that, and we get that before, but you guys know that happens.
So is there some education or some conversation with the applicant to make sure that they are making those known to us when they do their presentation? Because that would even be helpful for them to, like when they're presenting to us on that night, like, here are the changes that have been made between planning and council.
So here's the question that I have, because, and I may just be delusional about this, but at Planning Commission, not only do you have the staff report, which is great, and you do outline a lot of things in the staff report, but to your point, sometimes you don't know either, but the staff presents at planning, but we don't, I feel like we used to do that at council, and we don't now.
We used to, I think, I don't
Okay.
remember how many years ago it's been.
Okay.
City Manager Lewis was here at that time, and I don't know if he stopped it.
Yeah.
Do you know, Catherine? I don't want to.
I don't recall why it stopped.
But staff did, and he actually, there was some discussion, I think for some concerns such as what you're talking about right now,
Yeah.
that he and I actually visited, and he wanted to start that process again.
Yes.
We would
But
love
he, I don't think it ever got, obviously, it didn't get implemented. I
Right.
think he left.
Well, I would love to throw my support for that too, because I actually think a lot of the things that we're talking about
Could be
be
alleviated.
accomplished with the process that's in place if the staff has the opportunity, just like at planning, to say, here, you can outline what you've seen as you've
Here are the
watched the whole
facts.
project develop. So I would love to see that come back.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he and I had talked about is that when we get an item coming forward, we assign it to a staff member and they write the staff report. They're the ones that are communicating with the applicant. And sometimes I don't know what's been changed. I mean,
Right.
the applicant has talked to the staff member that wrote the staff report or something like that. So it really is a good idea if we have the same staff member
Yes.
come forward. Yeah.
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 So I think really there's a lot of things that we're talking about here that could be covered right there, to have the staff report first before the applicant report, just like that it's a mirror of what you do at planning. And then we have an opportunity to ask you, after your report, questions that we may have instead of the highly awkward, we need to talk to you, we need to talk to you, we need to talk to you. So I would love to see that come back myself, so. Any other comments?
So I throw my support to that.
Okay. Well, I think we've got plenty to chew on. Thank you so much. All right. I feel like I've been carrying that around for 2 years, y'all. Okay, so the next item is discussion regarding possible modifications to the total allowable coverage on a lot and height of fence in front of the front building setback line, and I know this is something that Ms. Hudson wanted to bring forward.
So I'm not going to say that mine's really short because I don't want to jinx it, so
Yeah.
this might take a while.
Yeah. Great.
Well, we have 30 minutes, and I know I got a pretty good idea about the last one. It won't take very much time, so please go ahead.
So I did want to bring these two items to you, and really this is so brief. This is just an overview, and I want direction from you and your thoughts, and,
Okay.
and then we'll come back here later if this is what you guys want to hear some more about. So in recent years, I have been asked several times by many in the community about the applications that we take to Board of Adjustment, and whether or not these might be some changes in the code that you guys want us to look at so that so many items don't go to Board of Adjustment for requests. And one of them is the coverage on a lot, and then the other one is the amendment to the fence height in front of the front building setback, because that's different than on the side. So just for the impervious coverage discussion, between 2012 and 2022, we've had 20 applications, 12 passed, 4 failed, 3 were withdrawn, and we've got one that has been postponed and will be coming back to Board of Adjustment on that one. Within those requests for the coverage, we've had 12 that were regarding the coverage, the 40% coverage for the structures, and we've had 8 that were the overall 65% on the lot. And these have all varied between 7, 5, 9% variances for the coverage of the structure, and for the overall coverage, it's been about the same, 4 or 5, so 69% or 44%, and stuff like that. So those have been the items that Board of Adjustment has heard for those. And I thought I had another sheet that had the, yeah, okay. And then for the front yard fence height discussion, since 2012, we've had 3, 2 passed, and 1, again, is still going to be coming back. And those were, one of them in 2014 was, they had an existing fence, it's over on Brookhaven Boulevard, they had an existing fence with 2.5, 3 foot brick wall, but then the top of it was wrought iron, so you could still see through it. And then they came back and they wanted to put like a stockade fence kind of thing on top of it, so then you wouldn't have the sight through that fence. And then the other one was a side yard fence, and it was just to block neighbors. We had a pool in a backyard, and somebody was looking over the fence, and so. And then the other one is the same thing. They're just looking for a fence height to go over the 8 feet. So for the front yard, and this really is like in town, so in your subdivisions, okay, in your platted subdivisions, in front of your front setback line, you cannot have a fence over 4 feet. If you think about your subdivisions, you pull into your driveway, you back out, and as you back out, you need to look over to see if there's a car coming, right? So we don't want that any higher than 4 feet. So there are some of the larger 2-acre lots, RE subdivisions and everything, that might want a taller fence and, out in front of their setback line. And so that's something that we want to continue to send to Board of Adjustment? Or is that something that maybe we want to have as an administrative approval, similar to what we do for lot line adjustments? They come in, lot line adjustments are reviewed, planning, public works, several different departments sign off on lot line adjustments and everything. So those are the 2 questions, that I'm giving to you. Ask you if you guys want to talk about them further. I'm happy to go back and do additional research, see what other communities have. Previously, in the mid-90s, regarding the coverage question, they had actually come forward to council at that time, and they were looking at, I want to say they were looking at 35% for the structures, and it ended up being 40 for all the structures. That's storage buildings, the main structure, pool houses, any of those structures that you have on the lot. So that's about it.
Any comments?
Sure.
Councilmember Schuler?
Just questions.
Yeah.
So maybe you could give a little bit of background of the process of the Board of Adjustment. Like, what is the timeline of that? How would it work through the process? Just thinking of how much of a time delay is that for our residents that have to go through that process? So, because I'm looking like this one, I'm like, okay, 20, that's a lot, but then only having 3 in the fence area, I'm like, is that really a lot in 10 years? Or
Not really.
Just thinking, trying to anticipate, is it worth looking at and changing, and are we going to get a bunch of things that we don't want? What, from your perspective? But if I have an understanding of,
So these are questions that have
timeline.
come from the community, so this is what I'm bringing,
Yeah.
forward to you. For Board of Adjustment, it's about a month.
Okay.
So, they get the application in at the beginning of the month, Board of Adjustment is at the end of the month. We do notify adjacent property owners, so it's really very similar to when we come forward to Planning Commission. It's not a 350-foot radius, I think it's 250.
Okay.
We do give the notice to the neighbors, and the neighbors have the opportunity to come to Board of Adjustment and express concerns, protest and or support, a neighbor's project that they have and everything. But it's about a 30-day, and they do have to, it's time for them. They have to come to the meetings and, submit their site plans and fill out an application, and there's questions that they have to answer as far as, is what you're asking us to approve, a special privilege that you might be getting that someone else isn't, and stuff like that. So it's not a terribly long process, but like I said, I've had several calls in recent years about the 3% over, the 4% over, you know? And do we think that allowing or making the change to go from 40% to 45%, is that a negative impact when the total coverage of the lot doesn't go over the 65? So, you know, we don't want to, you know, overload the lots by any stretch, but if you're still staying within that 65%, then, you know, is it really a negative impact?
Yeah. So I guess the proposal would be that they would still put in an application of some kind to staff, and it would go through a process to approve instead of going through this, or that we would do something different.
Only for the fences. That was
Okay.
so the fences would just be if that's what you guys wanted to look into. The fence process would be an administrative approval.
Okay.
This is a question of whether or not you want staff to come back and present to you a change in the ordinance to go from 40% building coverage up to 43, 45. Is there any, you know, appetite for you as council to change that 40% coverage on the lots for the structures?
So, on the face of it, I feel like no matter what we go to, there's always going to be the next 3%, 5%, like 4%, right? And so it's like the next level of things that are going to have to come to Board of Adjustment. And so, like, my question is, like, what is the basis for our current ordinance, and why have we chosen those percentages for, you know, stormwater management and mitigation? And so I would like answers to that, and really understanding like why it's written the current way before I would want to potentially entertain moving it up, because I think there's always the next bump up.
It's very possible, and with 20 in the last 10 years, that's not a lot.
Right.
And so, you know, if they did go to 45%, maybe we wouldn't see many at all, but there always would be that possibility that there would be, you know, some coming forward that would want to go past the 45.
No, just I don't know. I would like
Councilman
to see what
Brewer.
others have to say.
Studley?
So on, excuse me, on this currently, you're saying that if it goes over that 3%, then the applicant has to go to the Board of Adjustments to get the approval?
It goes over 40%. So like I said,
Well, I mean, but you had said 43, sorry. I was just meaning like that extra 3% over the threshold.
oh, no, I'm sorry. What I meant is, you know, if you wanted to up it to 43%. But no, if someone comes forward and they're going to add on to their house, you know, they bought a house, they've got, you know, large family, and they need to add on to the house, and they're going to go to 43% instead of 40%, then they go to Board of Adjustment for that 3% variance. Because right now, you know, your structure is at all the structures. I always say structure, but I mean all the structures on the lot is 40%.
Including the patio, the driveway, the,
That's the
No.
65.
Okay.
So the overall lot is 65%.
okay,
Impervious.
But your house, if you have a
Storage shed.
separate garage, if you have a storage building,
Okay.
all of those go into the 40% total coverage.
okay. I'm kind of with Councilmember Schuler on that. I feel like knowing the why behind before we make that decision, because there's always going to be that next. But again, you're talking 20 and 10 years. That's really not hardly anything. So I'd hate to waste more of your time on this for that. But I just don't want to get into a messy situation where we just continue to push the number.
Well, and it's, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
We always, I mean, they always have the opportunity to
Yeah.
go to Board of Adjustment. I mean, you know, no matter what it is, if it's 40 or 45, I mean, that's their opportunity to go and request that specific percentage increase.
Would that reduce the like staff's time and things like that, the Board of Adjustments, all that kind of stuff? It would reduce it by these few that we've had over the,
It would reduce it a little, I mean, 20, and like you said, in 10 years, you know,
Okay.
that's not a whole lot. I mean, there's other applications we get too, but that go to Board of Adjustment, but
yeah.
So I think this is an interesting question because I can, again, think back to a lot of examples. So is there a cost to the resident to do the notification process? You said they had to do a 250-foot
Right,
radius.
there is,
Okay. So,
there is.
yeah, I think that's relevant. I know it's considerable when it's 350.
Yeah, so for Board of a special exception, I want to say it's $250.
And is there any fee or any other type of cost that is involved to go to Board of Adjustment for stuff like this?
No, well, there is the legal in the paper. They have to advertise the
Okay.
request.
So that's additional? Okay. And,
I think it's $200, Councilmember Hall.
okay. So there is a cost to the resident, so that might be one of the reasons why you're getting some community input about this. So there's a time delay, there's a cost to the resident, and, $250 is probably considerable for a number of people. So you've got that as part of the equation here. And then the other piece that I really, I think you said that you have the ability to go back and determine, it sounded like the examples you were giving, the percentages were very modest, like 3%, 7%, something like that. And so, that does seem like a burden in some ways, and I totally get your point about no matter what you do, it's gonna maybe up it.
Creep up a little bit.
But if all of those 20 are under, say, are minimal,
Right.
I mean, that's another reason to consider why you might want to go to 45%. The other part of this is you have 40% for structures, and the rest of it is just concrete or something that's impervious. And if you keep it at 65% and change the structure size or the structure percentage, I mean, there's another kind of angle to look at this of you're reducing that impervious surface that's a driveway or a patio or something, and you are allowing residents to have a little bit more room to build their house, or it could be increased density of the actual dwelling. So I see that kind of on the plus side too, in considering this. So I'm going to save the rest of it. Councilmember Holman, did you
Yeah,
have?
yeah, I agree with that's kind of my thoughts about it too.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that other 20%, 25% is still going to be impervious surface. It just
Yeah.
would be a porch or a park or a driveway or whatever, and it could be more useful for it to be a
Yeah,
part of the property house.
for living.
But I was going to say, I'd be fine with allowing administrative discretion on the fencing issue
Yes.
for sure, and then we could continue talking about this
Yeah.
particular one. But yeah, I would feel okay with that change just based on
On the fence.
the fence and
Yes.
then the impervious surface part, just based on the fact they still wouldn't be able to go over the
Right.
maximum allowed.
Yeah, I don't want to change
I-
that.
Right.
I will agree with you guys at that point,
Yeah.
because it's, when you think about it, of that perspective of the 65, it's already gonna be taken up, so what's the difference between the concrete or the dwelling? More place for the
Well-
homeowner to get what they need out of it. So I agree with you. I think the ordinance, changing it to the 45 and the fencing, allowing administration to,
And we're still gonna have 5-foot side yard setbacks. The setbacks
Yeah.
aren't changing.
Yes.
25-foot front,
Yes.
20 rear, so that's not changing at all. So
Yeah.
they're still going to have to figure out how to, do this, but.
Yeah.
And it is 200. I wanted to look it up because it was
Okay.
gonna drive me crazy if I didn't look. And then it also is the ad transcript, and the ad in the transcript is just dependent on how long the legal is. If it's a lot and block, it's not a whole lot, but if it's longer, then it would be.
Yeah, Councilmember Schiller.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like thinking about it in terms of 65%
Right.
on the whole lot, and then this is structures. I hadn't considered
And
in
even
that way.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, changing the ordinance, then that will change all of the building, right? So this is like new build as well. So like if we have builders coming forward, it would allow for 45% for structure and then still have 65% for impervious.
Right, yeah, it would be
Yeah,
in the
okay.
R1, R2,
Right, whatever is in the, okay,
in the zoning
Yeah.
districts.
all right.
And I think, again, I'm not a planner, I'm not an engineer, I'm not in any of that, but when you think about the structures too, I mean, usually there's design built in to shed water or guttering or anything like that versus a big old slab of
Yeah.
Sure.
concrete. So that's just, do we want to explore more of the implication of upping it to 45% and then come back and,
Yeah, I'd still like to see
Okay.
what is that? Why was it at 40 and not 45 before? But I think that keeping it at 65% impervious on the whole lot, and then allowing for some leeway in, bringing this number down that's going to Board of Adjustment, and with the added information about cost to the resident and time and 30-day process and like that's real impact to people, right? Delay in your process, delay in material costs potentially going up while you're waiting on this, conflict with your neighbors potentially if they don't like what you're doing because of a notice process. Like we all understand that. So yeah, it does happen. So I mean, if we can alleviate some of those things, I think those are positive.
Yeah.
and I guess that leads to just one more question. I mean, and the 20 is not that much. I mean, has there ever been, with that notification process, has there been much pushback or engagement at the Board of Adjustment with neighbors?
There has been.
Okay.
There has been. I wouldn't say that it's overwhelming, but, you see it at council. It's personal, it's private property, it's, you're going to negatively impact me with, even if it is 3%. I mean, it's change, and it's scary for property owners, that are next to someone that wants to change and stuff like that. So it can get contentious sometimes.
Okay, so I think that gives you some direction that we need just a little bit more information, but I am intrigued about increasing the percentage and when that was actually put in place. Because I think all of us just recently have been, considering multimodal transportation and stormwater issues and impacts of, the pluses and minuses of a green belt and the role of a single-family home in the United States going forward. And, the 65%, I think we're probably all pretty solid on that. But I think, how that percentage for structures is determined is worth digging into a little bit more. So, does that sound okay with everybody? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, final topic with plenty of time is Ms. Lisa Craig with a brief update on what is happening at our shelter. And she has provided us with a document. Here you go.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
What did you do?
No, I was just gonna
Oh,
give
I
it to
need
Stephen. Yeah. Here you go.
So, March 1st through 31st, we actually had 1,070 bed stays.
Wow.
that were comprised by 106 individuals. Our nightly average, 35 capacity. We have a couple people that are staying at the shelter that are employed that have permission to come in after 10, and we can set up a couple of overflow cots when we need to do that. Our lowest night was 27, and then the demographics of who all was there. You know, when you compare this with the September 2021 through March 20, that's the date of our existing contract.
Okay.
And then December 20 was when we first opened at this location to date. So numbers were kind of interesting. I'm kind of a numbers nerd anyway, so. And anyway, that's what's going on at the shelter. We opened up the position for case managers again and are processing 5 hires. Maybe
For the shelter?
For the shelter.
Okay.
Maybe by the end of next week, we'll be able to start doing some training. HR's taking them through the paces right now. So we had 30 applicants.
Oh, wow.
Lots of experience at Walmart and Target. But these 2 people are actually intake people from the Housing Authority.
Nice.
2 of them are master's level social work students, and 1 is currently employed at Griffin. So,
Excellent.
so that's what we have coming on board.
Okay.
So
Councilmember Studley?
So I'm also a numbers person, and I've noticed that just in the month of March, we had 106 unique visitors. That's really high compared to 393 for, what is that, 6 months?
yeah, yeah.
Do you, I don't know if this is something you're able to talk about, but are you able to tell us what you're seeing or hearing of why there's such an increase in homeless? Because what I'm hearing when I'm out in the streets working with them is new evictions.
Haven't really dug that deep into it. We're seeing, you know, when I say unique, these numbers are all inclusive with each other. This isn't 106 brand new people. That just means that there were 106 different people
Okay,
during the month.
for the month.
I'd say we have pretty much about the same 20 people every night. Some people come in one night a week. Some people come in, you know, one night a month. Some people come in once, we never see them again. What I am seeing is people that have been housed becoming evicted. Not necessarily new to homelessness, but part of the cycle of being housed and then
Gotcha.
losing their housing for one reason or another.
Okay.
So,
Councilmember Holman?
I know that there's been a lot of talk about certain groups of people that may or may not stay there, but it looks like a lot of veterans are staying there, 15 in March,
yeah,
which looks like an increase of just the same thing with more more unique visitors. Seems to be more veterans staying there, and I don't know, it just maybe next time, would we be able to get something that shows all the numbers since we did the first year in the library too?
yeah, I
don't
can
know if we
pull,
were
I can
keeping
pull
as track.
that. I will tell you that the data quality is not as good,
Yeah.
but I can get raw numbers.
I
So-
mean, just to give an idea of how
Sure.
many people we've helped
Yeah.
in the last
The way
few years.
the system, the HMIS system is set up is that we have a project that says Norman Emergency Shelter. And so each night, guests are checked in, and then each morning I check them out. And so everything is within that one project, so we can go all the way back to December of 19, I guess it was, and pull those numbers. A lot of times, if you get down into the ages and the veterans, The data is not as good because, well, they keep increasing the data standards. And so when we first started, it was just put a name in there. And so now we're having to collect a lot more information, so.
This number tells me that without this shelter, there would be, since December 2020, there would have been 10,898 total people sleeping on the street instead, or nights stayed on the street instead of in a shelter
There would have
potentially.
been a total of 602 people that spent at least one night on the street.
Instead of in this shelter.
And there would have been a total of those 602 people would have 10,898 nights on the
Nights
street.
slept on the street.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty compelling
Yeah.
information to
Yeah.
me about why this
Mm-hmm.
service is needed. Of course, the discussion about whether the city should be the one operating it, but to me, it's pretty clear that it's needed regardless
Well,
of who's operating
and I
it.
think the interesting part, when we did the first round of the library, we had a capacity of 50.
Yeah.
And we never even got close. We started out on Comanche with a capacity of 35, and overall, we've averaged 19, but once you start kind of narrowing it down, bringing it forward, we're at capacity probably 3 nights a week, even with the weather being warm.
Yep.
So it's the use is there. So.
Yeah, so the need is there, and I was just going to comment on that too. And if you look at the nightly average, and it's only increased, which I think demonstrates the
Yeah.
need and demonstrates that folks are comfortable coming to stay there because they keep coming. And we now, really for the first time since 2019, our new challenge is hitting capacity much more often than we had been.
Yeah.
And so, that's just something to consider for the future. But we're obviously taking care of, we're using all the resources that we have available to provide a safe place to stay.
Right.
It's not like there's only 2 people there every night.
Right, and regarding the veterans, every Monday and Tuesday night, Mike Primo is
Yeah.
the lead staff.
Yeah, I'm glad you
And
brought
he
that
is
up.
the SSVF guy, and so he has a lot of interaction with the veterans on Monday and Tuesday nights, as well as throughout the week, encourage them that he sees in the encampments to come to the shelter.
And I think it's also, I don't think we can repeat this too often. One of the other pluses with having a shelter like this is there is case management available. Now, sometimes our guests may not be ready to take whatever that next step is, but that is the only place in town that you can get case management in
Yeah.
the evening
The-
hours.
The problem that we're seeing is that I attempt to have 4 staff each night. Sometimes we can't get it. Anytime we can get more than that, I go ahead and I'll just figure the money out later. Because it takes 4 staff for us to process someone coming in.
Is that including the security or
No, that's
plus?
not
So this
including
is
the
case
security.
management, okay.
And so what happens is we're working and someone says, hey, I want to talk to you about X, Y, Z. And we're like, okay, give me a few minutes and I'll come find you. And you go find them and they're asleep.
Yeah,
And so, pretty much I've asked the staff, if even though we just have 4, can we, get some more? So we're trying to have many nights with 5. I'm worthless to talk to as a case manager.
oh, but you have so many other strengths.
I can do a temperature check and put the input, carry the bag to the storage room, but you don't want me talking to them. So,
Takes a village.
yeah.
Councilmember Schuler.
Well, my question was really related to, highlighting that we have case managers on staff and are working with, the guests of the shelter, but really wondering about how that is also maybe helping as a place to recognize that this is a safe place, that you are getting services while you're in the facility, but then also asking kind of a question about how have we seen that help move people forward through the housing, or like
Very-
to
very
get
good
housed
question.
or like get vouchers. I know that we have a gap in
Yeah.
being able to provide housing even once they are approved for the vouchers and things like that. But
Yeah.
how is that process working?
Right now, we're kind of stuck. While we have the case managers on site, the problem that we're having is that they can help direct to another entity, but we don't have anybody from Food and Shelter working. We don't have anybody from Catholic Charities working. That it
You
is a
mean that
lot
night
of
for them
just,
to reach out to or coming into the shelter?
well, that are working in the shelter as case
Okay.
managers. And
Okay.
so you come in and we talk to you and we say, okay, here's where we think you might want to start on this. And this is what you're going to need. And then we refer them to Catholic Charities or whatever. And we try to send that information. Well, it may be a week before they mosey over there. Catholic Charities don't know they're coming. Really don't know what to do with them. And so what we have is we've got some people in the shelter that the way the coordinated case management works each Friday is an agency actually advocates for a voucher for that client. We're having trouble getting those agencies to take because they're so overloaded.
Oh, I see.
And, you've got us running around over there and we're thinking, so we're looking at some stuff, like if you look here, during the month of March, we had 9 individuals that were over 62. So I've had a meeting with Aging Services about possibly stepping in and doing some case management. They have trained case managers on staff. It's not the housing resources, the vouchers that we're short on.
No,
We're short on the housing to use the vouchers on.
Yeah.
And we're short on the case managers that help to shepherd the clients through the application, through the housing search and the moving in.
and I think that really came out also as one of the recommendations in the home-based study of just the communication issues and how can we continue to improve upon that.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's willing, of course, but
Yeah,
it's just
you know,
making
we-
sure we can connect all those dots. Councilmember Holman, and then we're just about out of time.
So I was gone during the meeting, study session about the shelter, and I did watch it though on YouTube. So what are the next steps as far as that goes? Is that coming back to? Is it coming here? Is it coming to the whole council as far as moving the shelter and the questions that were asked about funding and moving it to a different address and all that stuff?
Well, I think
Registry
really
or
the direction
checking
was, we had four separate things that had to be attended to. 2 of them have to do with getting permission from the Department of Commerce. One was to be able to add another data collection point, basically, and the other one was to get permission to be able to continue receiving our grant money in another location. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking with the Department of Commerce, even though we applied as a low barrier shelter, meaning that you show up, you give us a name, we let you in. Putting the extra layer of review as to whether or not you're a registered sex offender. We would no longer be considered a low barrier shelter, but that would not jeopardize our funding. We would have to go in and change some policies and procedures and things like that. In order to relocate the shelter, we have to provide them information regarding a lease, where it's going to be, is it appropriately zoned, does it meet the fire marshal, all of the things we had to do to establish this shelter. We're at the middle of April, our contract runs out the end of August. I really have a hard time trying to figure out how we could actually facilitate a change during the contract, because we can have no disruption in services. meaning that we'd close at 7 a.m. on this site, and we'd have to open at 7 p.m. on the new site. If it is determined that we need to move to another location, which it's been determined we need to
Yeah.
move to another location,
Yes.
then my recommendation to the manager was that we commit, if possible, to stay at this location till August 31st, until we are readying whatever the new location is. And if we're ready a week early, then, you know, we would maybe jeopardize a week's worth of funding to move over. But, you know, there's so many moving parts in a new location. Is it going to be contracted to another entity, which means that everybody that we have on staff that is employed and all the contracts we have with security and cleaning and linen all become null and void because the operator will be required to do that. Obviously, the operator will have to have a contract that goes through council for the funding. And so, you know, my recommendation was that we commit to this funding at this location through the end of August, while the pursuit of what's going to happen on September 1st goes simultaneously.
And the other part was the directing the city manager to see if we could be successful in a MOU with the State Department of Health. So yeah, lots of moving parts. We're really going to have to stop it there.
Okay.
And thank you so much for your time.
Well, I
Really
was just going to
appreciate
tell you really quick, we have a new collaborative applicant.
it. Yes,
Thunderbird Clubhouse, we went through that process.
yes. Very good.
It's done, but we had to register because HUD, even though they said they could do it, they didn't do it. So the city of Norman had to register as the collaborative applicant, and they're going to have to sort it out later. But they are performing as the collaborative
Great.
applicant. So we're
And maybe
trying
that
to,
transition time is,
well, it's, you know, and it's a little comforting to me because I'm having to relearn all this stuff
Yeah.
anyway. And so we're all just sitting down and relearning it together.
okay.
So,
Thank you so much.
all right.
Thank you, Lisa.
And we are 5 minutes over, so this meeting is